Was Bo Jackson maybe the greatest athlete we've ever seen? If so, why has he been forgotten by popular culture? Bo knows 80s today on Rad History. Welcome to Rad, an 80s, 90s history podcast looking back at the last time things were relatively normal and chill. I'm your host, Brian McCullough. Today we're going to tell the story of Bo Jackson. A strong case can be made that he was the greatest American athlete of all time. There was a period of time in the 1980s and 1990s when Jackson was also, arguably, the most famous person in America, maybe even more famous than Michael Jordan. And yet, while Jordan's fame lives on, somehow it's likely that few people under age 30 know who Bo Jackson was. Today we look at the greatest two-sport athlete ever to do it, his incredible success as a product pitchman, and the injury that forced him to retire before his time. Vincent Edward Jackson arrived in this world on November 30th, 1962, in Bessemer, Alabama, 8th of 10 children in a house where noise and scarcity were constants and afternoons could stretch long as summer shadows. Family lore led quickly to the nickname the nation would learn to chant, Bo. His people said, short for Boar Hog, because the boy at 5, 7, 10 was all muscle and motion and mischief. A battering ram in sneakers, forever hurtling toward whatever dared to stand still. Later, his biographer, Jeff Pearlman, would trace that moniker to childhood episodes that made elders shake their heads. Evidence in their telling of the wildness that had to be pointed somewhere productive, or it might ruin him. The name stuck because it fit. Bo was blunt, rural, unpretentious, and strong. Bo grew up in a low-slung house on Butler Avenue, where winter nights meant edging as close as you dared to the heater, close enough that a kid might wake up with low-level burns in the morning. Florence Bond, a single mother with more children than beds, ran the household on grit and the occasional miracle, and young Bo learned early that you kept your head down and your body moving. There were 2 beds for a crowd, so most nights the children took the floor. Food came from odd jobs, church kin, and whatever granddaddy snag could pull from the woods. Rabbits, coons, possum. If a turtle turned up in the road, that could become dinner too. Bo's father, A.D. Adams, was absent. What Vincent did inherit from him wasn't money or presents, but a stutter so heavy it humiliated him. He'd be nearly a year older than many of his classmates by the time his mother forced him to do first grade over. The speech therapy he needed didn't exist in that district or in Bessemer. Bo's temper arrived early too. One 4th of July, a fight at a public pool spiraled so quickly that shots were fired. Another afternoon ended with a man shattering a glass door and a cleanup crew sweeping blood into a dustpan at the Re-Center. In a place where grudges traveled fast and pride traveled faster, Vincent learned to explore before anyone had the chance to corner him. The kitchen table lectures, when they came, could be brutal. An extension cord at the ready, Florence once gripping the wire in one hand and a .38 in the other, as she warned Bo against trying to run away before she could discipline him. The lesson wasn't subtle. The world might be hard, but your mother will be harder, because she wants you alive. The nickname Bo fit the body he was growing into, broad-backed, high-calved, fast. By the time Bo reached McCattery High School, he had already discovered athletics as an outlet. In track and field, he was a decathlete, and more than that, a 2-time Alabama state champion, whose margin was so immense he could skip the last event, the 1,500 meters, and still win. He was the kind of phenom who could twist off the wrong foot when doing the high jump and still go 6 feet, or borrow a too small pole vault pole and clear 12 feet 6 inches on 5 minutes of instruction. There was no fancy facilities at McAdary. There was Bo and whatever he could borrow. The point totals piled up. 7 of 10 decathlon events won. State titles stacked back to back. He set state school indoor records in the high jump and the triple jump. But Bo didn't excel in a few sports. He excelled in them all. The day after that decathlon wrapped, he didn't collapse on a couch or find a porch with shade. He laced up for a double header at Rickwood Field, the old palace of Birmingham baseball. On the baseball field, he hammered 20 home runs in just 25 games. On the football field, as a senior, he rushed for 1,175 yards. By July 1981, the secret was escaping Alabama. There was a single square photograph. A teenager named Vincent Jackson appeared in Sports Illustrated's Faces in the Crowd, celebrated for a triple jump record, a decathlon title, and a batting average that made pitchers throw up. Major League Baseball noticed Bo first. In June 1982, the New York Yankees used a second-round pick, 50th overall, on the broad-shouldered teenager from McAdary. The glamour of the pinstripes beckoned, but Bo demurred. He had promised his mother that he would go to college. Out of loyalty, and because there was still something he felt he needed to prove in football, Bo turned the Yankees down and focused first on the gridiron. The courtship that followed was a tale of two programs. Alabama, still under the long shadow of the legendary Bear Bryant, summoned Bo to Tuscaloosa without ceremony. Bo had to bum a ride in another recruit's Firebird, took a tour like any other student, ate a free lunch like any other recruit, but Bear didn't come down from his tower to even shake Bo's hand. He made Bo climb up to him. The pitch was half-hearted, the vibe was archaic, and there was vague talk of playing defense. Auburn, by contrast, had a new coach in Pat Dye and a roster starving for a superstar. The Tigers offered Bo not just a scholarship, but an identity. Be our weapon, and we'll build the whole team around you. For a kid who had said he didn't intend to leave the state, the choice narrowed to a question of pride and potential. Would it be Alabama or Auburn? Bo chose Auburn. Freshmen at Auburn in those days lived in a bubble. Sewell Hall Suites, a shared bathroom with Tommy Agee and Lionel James, fellow players. Steak and shrimp in the training table line. Bo chewed plastic straws to manage his rookie nerves. The country had barely seen him, and already there was talk that Bo could be the next Herschel Walker. In the hours before Bo's 1982 opener against Wake Forest, while the locker room thumped and hummed with anticipation, assistants found him asleep in 2 folding chairs, shoulder pads on the floor, snoring lightly. It was either the strangest version of calm anyone had witnessed before a big event, or a kid trying anything to shut out his anxiety. When the game came, Bo punched across his first collegiate touchdown from the 1-yard line, and the state started printing Go Bo slogans like a small-town revival. Auburn in 1982, under Coach Dye, ordered its offense around the wishbone and its hopes around freshmen bold enough to seize a moment. Bo didn't arrive to be a mascot. He arrived to have his moment. He averaged 6.5 yards per carry as a freshman, and the Tigers clawed their way back into bowl contention for the first time in 8 years. The game that branded Bo forever in the state's memory came, naturally, against Alabama. The Iron Bowl that November had the old tension of a family argument. Bear Bryant's Crimson Tide guarding a 9-game winning streak. Auburn feeling the first stiff wind of a revival of its fortunes. With 2 minutes, 26 seconds left in the game, Auburn faced 4th down at the 1. Dye asked a freshman what he had to give. What Bo had to give was a high jumper's sense of space. In the play, he leaped over the top, as the phrase would become, helmet surfing the scrum, and thumped into the end zone for the winning touchdown. Auburn 23, Alabama 22. It was Bear Bryant's final Iron Bowl, and it ended in a hush for his side and a roar for the other. And across the state, a freshman was no longer just potential. He was now a verb. A week later, the Tigers beat Boston College in the Tangerine Bowl, 33-26. Doug Flutie threw for nearly 300 yards, but Bo Jackson had the day's blunt instrument, 2 scoring plunges, and the sense that Auburn's offense was shifting on its axis from hope to certainty with a freshman as its fulcrum. Sophomore year for Bo was the kind of sequel that makes coaches grin. Jackson averaged an absurd 7.7 yards per carry in 1983, amassing 1,213 yards on just 158 attempts. The numbers read like a typo until you watch the film. A first step that is both lunge and glide, and then the ankle-wrecking acceleration that makes linebackers reach for a jersey they cannot quite touch. The season produced Auburn's first SEC title since 1957, and a 9-7 wrestling match of a Sugar Bowl win over Michigan. But the image that won't fade is from Legion Field again, the 1983 Iron Bowl, when Bo ripped Alabama for 256 rushing yards, including touchdown skies of 69 and 71-yard runs. Rain and wind whipped as if the sky itself had decided to play defense, but they couldn't catch him either. In a rivalry that writes its legend in capital letters, that day made Bo unavoidable. If the 1983 version of Bo felt essential, 1984 reminded everyone he was human. A nagging injury limited his impact that year. Worse, the rivalry that had lifted him into state legend became the place where fallibility would leave a bruise on his reputation. Wrong way, Bo, they called it. 4th and goal against Alabama, the call was a pitch to Brent Fullwood with Bo to seal the edge. Jackson went the wrong direction. The Tide defense upset the play, and Alabama held on. In a game where inches and instincts sprayed together, one misread can feel like a scar. Jackson wore that scar quietly. Then he answered the only way he could. In the Liberty Bowl against Arkansas, he scored twice on the ground and turned a brief catch into a 39-yard thunder run for the decisive points. Jackson was named MVP in the bowl. In the midst of all this, Bo had returned to baseball, and not just as a side hobby. Hal Baird took over Auburn baseball and found his clubhouse suddenly lit up by a star who didn't care about polish so much as havoc. Bo's senior baseball line reads like a dare. Batting average north of 400, 17 home runs, 28 stolen bases. Bo now also became a campus folk hero with a bat. And then there was Athens. Georgia's first night game at Foley Field brought Bo to town. He responded with an exhibition stolen from myth, 3 home runs and a triple. 1 homer, slamming the new light standard in center field as if he had scripted his own moment from that movie, The Natural. Bulldogs fans would keep telling the story of that home run because it sounded like fiction, and yet several thousand people saw it. Bo had not given up on track either because it had always been a laboratory for his other sports. Bo dominated Auburn track and field as well in sprints and relays. His name and program notes next to times that made SEC timers check their watches twice. The raw mechanics that let him wrong foot a high jump in high school weren't gone. They'd just been poured into different uniforms. He was a sprinter who hit like a linebacker, a baseball center fielder who took first steps like a cornerback breaking on a slant. Watching him move was like seeing multiple sports writing the same sentence. The autumn of 1985 then set up like a coronation for Bo, but with traps embedded under every step. Auburn opened ranked number 1 in the nation. Jackson was the face of Auburn football once again. And in Knoxville, the season took its first swerve. Tennessee's Tony Robinson pitched the Vols into a frenzy. The defense smothered, and Auburn fell 38-20, while Jackson was held to just 80 yards on 17 carries. If you were inclined to ding Bo for this particular performance, you might say that the Vols had figured out his formula. If you knew better, you said, be careful poking something that strong, because it just made him angry. The season's middle stretch showed Bo coming back to his best. Against Florida State, Auburn broke open a tight game with a fourth-quarter avalanche. Jackson had already knifed 53 yards for a score on the second play from scrimmage, and later danced 35 yards for another. By the end, he had 176 rushing yards on 30 carries, and the scoreboard blinked 59-27. It felt like the kind of win that turns doubt into shrugging acceptance. Sometimes inevitability wears the jersey number 34. There were still snags, though, an aching thigh. Florida's defense holding just enough line to steal a 14-10 decision in Gainesville that year. But by mid-November, the Heisman math and the SEC calculus still ran through Auburn's tailback. The night Bo most clearly reasserted the trophy case he was making, and his determination came between the hedges at Georgia. The Bulldogs entered with one of the fiercest run defenses in the nation. Bo greeted them with a 67-yard touchdown blast, a 6-yard power finish, and 121 yards that felt like more in context. In the span of those 4 quarters, Bo shrugged off the whispers from Knoxville as just that, noise from an earlier week. Auburn left 24-10 winners. Jackson left at the head of the Heisman queue. Pulled back to the larger ledger, his senior season remains almost comically robust. 1,786 rushing yards, the second-best single-season total in SEC history at the time, 17 touchdowns, and a storm of runs where the first tackler simply had no chance. When voters compared him to Iowa quarterback Chuck Long, they were really comparing aesthetics. Long mastered precision. Jackson cracked games open. The Heisman arrived in December as the closest vote yet recorded, a narrow decision that nevertheless felt perfectly right. Heisman voters wanted a back who could go through you and past you in the same heartbeat. Bo got his Heisman, and his Auburn career closed with 4,303 rushing yards and an SEC record 6.6 yards per carry, with a minimum of 400 attempts in the record book, numbers that sit there like granite, unblinking and undeniable. Those numbers are only the football half of Bo's double helix, of course. The rest was his bat speed, the shoulder-high catches on the warning track, the first step that turned singles into doubles, and the idea, by the spring of his senior year, that Bo Jackson could choose which world to rule, which sport to dominate. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers steered into the story here, courting Bo hard, and this is the version preserved in memory and in Perlman's reporting, assured Bo a private plane visit for a workout would be fine with the NCAA. Turns out it wasn't. A disciplinary ruling over this recruiting no-no cost Jackson the rest of his 1986 college baseball season. Bo believed deeply and permanently that the Buccaneers had burned him, and he swore they would not profit from it. The Buccaneers drafted him anyway, first overall in the 86 NFL draft, but Bo simply refused to sign. Bo knows would later be a marketer's bumper sticker, but that spring, it was a young man staking a boundary. It's hard to overstate how shocking Bo's stance of turning down a contract looked at the time. Here was the most electric running back in the country, the first pick in the NFL draft by a franchise that expected gratitude, declaring that a principle mattered more to him than a depth chart. The Kansas City Royals, in baseball, fresh off a World Series, called Bo's bluff in his other sport. They took him in the 4th round of the 1986 Major League Baseball draft, a bet on athleticism and will, and Jackson snapped his name onto their contract within weeks. He signed with the Royals for a 7-figure deal, strode into the camp, and started announcing himself in the most Bo way possible by turning batting practices into exhibitions in hitting. The Royals sent him to Double-A Memphis, where the minor league towns felt too small for the force of nature that had just blown in, and he didn't stay in the minors long. That September, the Royals called him to the big club, and on September 14th, 1986, in his second at-bat of the afternoon, Bo tomahawked a Mike Moore fastball clear over the swath of manicured lawn in the left center at Royal Stadium. The ball traveled an estimated 475 feet, believed at the time to be the longest in the park's history. A debut salvo, so on the nose, it again reads like something from the movies, as if the narrative gods had decided to make their intent plain. The rawness was also obvious that first month. Bo hit .207 and saw Major League pitching bend him into strikeouts as easily as it bent lesser mortals. But the contours of the myth were still there. A right-handed slugger with track star legs, shoulders like an anvil, and a gait that made the outfield look small. The Royals left him in left field to begin 1987, and the learning curve steepened and brightened in tandem. He slugged 22 home runs and stole 10 bases in 116 games, enough blasts and bolts to convince even the skeptics that the project wasn't a publicity tour, it was the real thing. The strikeouts piled up too, yes, 158 of them, but when Bo connected, the sound his bat made was different, the sort of crack that made infielders flinch before they moved. What turned the Bo Jackson project into a cultural event, however, wasn't only the baseball, it was the audacity of that second career getting a restart. In April 1987, the Los Angeles Raiders, bold where other franchises were timid, used a seventh-round flyer on the man who had already told the NFL, for the moment, to wait. Raiders owner Al Davis had negotiated what sounded like a loophole in physics, a 5-year deal that would let Jackson finish his baseball season every year and only then report to football when the last out in Kansas City fell, even if that meant missing a chunk of the NFL schedule. The package, reported at the time at $7.4 million with a $500,000 signing bonus and another $500,000 if he returned in 1988, made him the highest paid non-quarterback in the league, a bet on spectacle as much as yards. Bo, in his laconic way, accepted on one condition. The order of operations would never flip. It would always be baseball first, football afterwards. Bo Jackson was not the first professional multi-sport athlete, but he was the highest profile one ever, and his legend was only getting started. The legend that followed him from college would, if anything, only grow bigger in the pros. But that is for the next chapter. Thanks for listening, and keep this feed open because I hope to have part 2 of the Bo Jackson story to you in a couple of weeks.